Hello, it's Friday the 25th of March and you're watching Scotland at 7 with me, Hugh Stewart, and also in the studio is Linda Fabiani. So we'll discuss tonight's main stories in a couple of minutes after I run through the latest from the Ukraine war. Day 29. Ukraine's emergency services are reporting, it's day 30, Ukraine's emergency services are reporting on an oil depot in the village of Kalniovka in the northwest of the country, which was hit by Russian shelling and caught fire overnight. Russia and Ukraine exchanged prisoners in the first swap of soldiers since Moscow invaded a month ago. Ukraine's Vice Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk said, writing, the first full-fledged exchange of prisoners of war took place where 10 captured soldiers were exchanged for 10 Ukrainian service personnel. In a recent update published to her official Telegram channel just before midnight local time, Vereshchuk said that the humanitarian hostages taken in Mangush had been released. Ukraine accused Moscow of forcibly taking hundreds of thousands of civilians from shattered Ukrainian cities to Russia, where some may be used as hostages to pressure Kyiv to give up. Lyudmila Dezyanova, the Ukraine's ombudsperson said 402,000 people, including 84,000 children, had been taken against their will. The UN told the BBC that Ukrainians were being arbitrarily detained and subjected to enforced disappearances in the Russian-controlled areas. Volodymyr Zelensky shared his appearance at the EU summit, where he thanked European Council members for putting sanctions on Russia, but said it was a little late. In a video message posted to that appeared in a video message posted on his official Facebook account, the Russian former president Dmitry Medvedev said it was foolish to believe Western sanctions against Russian businesses could have any effect on the Moscow government. The sanctions would only consolidate Russian society and not cause popular discontent with the authorities, Medvedev told Russia's RIA news agency in an interview. President Joe Biden will travel to a town near the Polish-Ukrainian border today, Friday, in an attempt to signal Western resolve. The US president is expected to meet experts on the humanitarian response and US troops stationed in Poland. On Saturday, tomorrow, he's due to meet his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda to discuss the humanitarian and human rights crisis resulting from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The UK's Minister of Defence says the Ukrainian forces have reoccupied towns and defensive positions up to 35 kilometres east of Kyiv. In an earlier report, the ministry said Ukraine was striking high-value targets, which was forcing Russian troops to divert resources to defend their supply lines. It cited the attacks on a landing ship and ammunition storage depots at Berdyansk as examples. It is likely that the Ukrainians will continue to target logistical assets in the Russian-held areas. This will force the Russian military to prioritise the defence of the supply chain and reduce ability to carry out its offensive operations, it said. That was the UK Ministry of Defence estimates. Ukrainian forces have been bolstered by the destruction of that Russian landing ship as it brought in supplies to its troops. Dramatic pictures showed fire and black smoke billowing from the vessel as it docked in Berdyansk on the Azov Sea after it was hit by a Ukrainian ballistic missile, or several of them. The Ukrainian Defence Ministry says its troops had pushed back Russian forces in some areas around the capital of Kyiv. Russian troops did not have enough resources to push ahead with their offensive in Ukraine. Alexander Mozanskik, Ukraine's defence minister spokesman, said these accounts appear to be corroborated by a senior Pentagon official who said Russia was running out of precision-guided munitions and was more likely to rely on so-called dumb bombs and artillery. The Under-Secretary of Defence for Policy, Colin Kahl, said Russia was experiencing failure rates as high as 60% for some of its precision-guided missiles, while its forces had taken heavy casualties and were low on supplies. So, Linda, that's what we have today on
Yeah.
Ukraine's attack from Russia, day 30. Sorry, I forgot to update from yesterday's. Just before we move on, any quick reaction to what we've heard today?
Well, it's interesting to hear all the, the military reports of what's happening. Something else that was getting covered today was the view that, well, Russia has seemingly said that phase 1 of their operation has been a success, and that they're now moving away from Kiev and down to the eastern controlled areas. Is that true? I mean, I don't think they have had a success in my limited knowledge. But is it a bluff? Is it a fact? Are they consolidating down in the disputed areas? I don't know. But behind all of that, there's still the ordinary folk getting absolutely hammered. And there's really worrying reports out today about, as in every conflict situation, you get bad people, not necessarily on any side or another in the conflict, but just nasty folks looking to take full advantage of terrible humanitarian situations. And there's a real concern now about trafficking of children. And I think that's a real worry. People turning up as volunteers, pretending to be volunteers, taking children away ostensibly to look after them. And it must be very hard when a country's moving like Ukraine is, and you have young mothers, you have young children, unaccompanied children, being taken full advantage of. And it's hard for the authorities to register them as well and keep track. So, as in every situation, we have to be so vigilant across all the countries involved.
Yes, that is one of the issues that was raised last week by the European Commissioner. She did say that there is an opportunity for trafficking, and we must be careful. So I don't know how you do that without setting up bureaucratic procedures. This leads into the next story. Of course, the UK government has said we do need to check. We need to vet who's coming, and we also need to vet where they're going to. If somebody offers their home, we need to know who and why are they offering you a home. So I suppose that is an issue that has to be taken seriously. Nonetheless, our next story says that a Scottish guy, Andrew Murray, who's been in Ukraine trying to get people across here, has found that the UK settlement scheme is a disgrace, as he puts it. He finds the bureaucratic jumps that people have to try and surmount as embarrassing, really. So have you heard any of that kind of story?
Well, I've been looking at some of this, and I've been following very closely David Hamilton, who is a guest on this programme fairly often, very knowledgeable man about such issues. And David is just in despair. I was reading some of the things he's been writing recently about the hoops that people are having to go through under the UK system. It's just absolutely ludicrous. Some of the expectations, first of all, having to do the online forms for visas. I mean, how do you get online when you're fleeing for your life in the midst of chaos? And, I also read when he said that he'd heard about a family told that dad's permission, the father's permission, was needed to take this 16-year-old girl out of the country. Father's away back somewhere fighting for his life amidst bombs. Are you really saying that this is absolutely necessary? So the bureaucracy seems to have run wild. And the way that the UK government is dealing with vulnerable refugee people, I just think is shaming.
Now, meanwhile, the Scottish Government doesn't, of course, have any control over the Home Office rules, but they do seem to have made a negotiation with authorities in London for the Scottish Super Sponsor Scheme, I think is the name. Yeah. And looking at how you have to do that today, first of all, the Scottish Government's advice is to Ukrainians coming to the UK is once you've got online, assuming you've got electrical supply and assuming you can charge up your phone, and you can't do that in the city of Mariupol, of course, where there's no electricity, and maybe others, but assuming you can actually get online, the advice is tick on the box saying, I want to come to Scotland. So after that, the Scottish Government, presumably, I don't know if how much have they been themselves vetting who are the people who come forward to offer their homes.
Well, what Nicola Sturgeon said right at the start was, bring these people here, then we'll deal with the bureaucracy. Nobody can deny that there's a humanitarian crisis. Nobody can deny that the vast, vast majority of people who are fleeing and looking for sanctuary are genuine. So, don't make them go through hoops in the middle of a conflict situation. Bring them here and then we'll do the paperwork. And she's been consistent with that message. And it appears she has now reached agreement with the UK government that there will be a number of people coming from Ukraine who will automatically come to Scotland, and then we'll deal with the paperwork. Now, the will is there. We know that in Scotland, whether it be government at national level or indeed local authorities or the many, many organisations and charities who deal with such things, everyone's going to pull together to try and do the best for these families and for these people. So, yes, bring them here. We'll sort it out.
Now, one thing that can be done, of course, to vet potential hosts, of course, is
Yeah.
the PVG, the Protection of Vulnerable Adults and Children, which is the same thing that carers and teachers
Yes.
have to fill in, of course. So the Scottish Government is offering to do that for free. So you do
Yeah.
need to get checked. You do need to get your PVG, but you
Yes.
don't have to pay for it. So that's
Yes.
one way in which the Scottish Government is helping to streamline. But that's, as I said before, only assuming everyone can get online in the first place. I think it was Andrew Murray himself pointed out a 4-year-old child who was being knocked back because they had to get their passport up to date. So
Oh, for goodness
how
sake.
are you going to do that? How's this 4-year-old going to go back home and get the passport stamped? Maybe they should take it to the office in Paris to expedite. So lots of complaints about getting people through the bureaucracy into the UK, but the Scottish Government is certainly anxious to help. Now, on a slightly related topic, we're bringing up the Home Office again, which is certainly not Department of the Year of the UK Government. Now, we've heard a story today which goes back to 3 years ago, that with asylum seekers who had landed off boats in the south coast of England, the Home Office apparently had been seizing their mobile phones, and apparently 2,000 phones at least were taken. And the reason we're bringing this up today is because in a court ruling in London, that has been decreed to be illegal. There was no legal excuse, no legal justification or authority for Home Office officials to either demand the phones of these poor people or to insist that they open them up, give them the passwords, which then allowed the Home Office to go through their address book and files and see who they've been talking to. So that was unlawful. So the Home Office did that because they said, we were trying to see who your traffickers are.
It's not only unlawful, it's immoral. You know, when you think of people fleeing, the huge concern for the people they've left behind, because, you know, these folk fleeing are trying to find a safe haven for the rest of their family, mostly. Trying to find a bit of humanity, you know, and the idea of being treated almost like a criminal the minute you land, it's just abhorrent, and you don't even have that lifeline contact with those back home that you think you might be able to get in touch with somebody who knows somebody who can tell you whether those you love are safe. And that last link has been taken away from you. But there's no surprises with UK Home Office. They're horrible, they're awful. You know, the policies that have been put in place by the UK government are against any kind of humanity that you can see. I mean, this is a government that we're talking about criminalising the RNLI for saving people from drowning at sea.
Yes, this is now
appalling.
law. This is under the Nationality and Borders Act, which
man.
potentially opens up prosecution to people who help somebody. If you find somebody struggling to try and get onto the beach at Dover, are you going to be a criminal because you helped this person out? So, I mean, that is actually now the law of the land.
It's beyond words.
But that's, of course, I mean, this goes back to Theresa May's hostile environment and those vans going around saying, are you illegal? We are looking for you, get
It started
out.
small and it's just grown and grown and grown. One of the things I would say is, I mean, certainly in Scotland, there isn't a mass or general support for that kind of behaviour. And that gives me hope for the future, that Scotland can become its own nation, that takes its own decisions, and that part of its decision will be that we are going to be a good neighbour to what we have in the world now, which is globalisation and people are close. and we all depend one on the other.
Yes, the Scottish Super Sponsor Scheme, I suppose, is as much as the Scottish Government can do.
Yeah.
And I believe that it really involves negotiation with people like Michael Gove to say that, well, are you going to allow us to do this? We want to set up this programme, but are you going to block it? And so there is some sort of negotiation.
Well, he's agreed. I mean, he has said that he has reached agreement with Scotland's First Minister about this. So sometimes words aren't enough, so we'll see what the actions are.
Yes, so let's see how this all plays out, because obviously this story is not going to go away for a long time as Vladimir Putin continues his illegal and unsuccessful war in Ukraine. Now we're going to move on to another story which was what dealt with during the week, which was the UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak's mini budget, or his spring statement. We reported at the time, Linda, that he didn't seem to have much in there about dealing with poverty and dealing with the people who are having huge problems paying their electricity and gas bills, which are possibly going to go to £3,000 for a typical family, while, as the government itself said, people on fixed incomes, such as pensioners or people on benefits, don't have the opportunity to increase their income, but they do have the opportunity to increase their electricity and gas bills. So the government itself pointed out there's a huge gap opening up. So I was actually reading through here on Wednesday, reading through the statement, trying to find what support Rishi Sunak was delivering to ordinary people stuck in poverty, and I couldn't find it.
No. I mean, I listened to a lot of very knowledgeable commentators about such things on both sides of the political divide. So I listened to some of the right-wing commentators as well as what I would deem to be the caring commentators. And even the biggest supporters of the Tories in Westminster were not able to point out where the benefit was for ordinary folks. And when you look at the way they took away the money from the universal credit folk, when you look at the farce of what is supposed to be a benefit to help you pay your fuel bills, there's nothing there, absolutely nothing there. And the top earners have not been affected in any bad way whatsoever by any of this.
Yes, I did read a breakdown of the figures the other day, which showed that the tax cut, which by the way doesn't come in for 2 years, and who knows, there'll be a lot of water
and we'll
under
be
the
way
bridge by
behind
then.
inflation again.
Yes, it will. And the one concession that Rishi Sunak did make is to say that although he is going ahead with the increase in national insurance, which of course is just another income tax, but he did say that the level at which it comes in is 12,500 now, the same as income tax. But of course, many people, particularly the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, who examine the worsening of poverty in the UK, the Rowntree Foundation pointed out that, well, for something like 40% of adults aren't actually in employment, so where you pitch the level of the income tax is of no consequence. So the further breakdown suggested that it's really richer, it's better off workers, people above 32,000 will have a tax cut, people below that will either be unaffected or it won't make any difference. Also I read today in the Guardian, the Joseph Rowntree Trust said that 600,000 more throughout the UK are going to go into poverty over the next period.
Absolutely. And that's why, again, the mitigation that is carried out by the Scottish Government is really important. And we shouldn't forget that all the Scottish Government is able to do is to mitigate the effects of the bad policies of Westminster. So the child payment that was introduced, for example, has been increased. Very important. Very, very important. But we should never lose sight of the fact that all we can do is mitigate. Think what we could do if we could take our own decisions.
But it just shows you, at least even with the devolution, Scotland can make a difference, and that difference is not small. But I listened to Shona Robinson's talk to Parliament yesterday, where she commended the increase. This was a surprise to us. At the moment, the child benefit is £10 per child only for young children, and the Scottish Government already announced that would go up to £20 from the new financial year. That's just over a week. But I was surprised with the announcement yesterday that's actually going to be further increased to £25, as you said, Linda. And secondly, at the end of the year, it's to every child under 16. So it's a massive increase.
you shouldn't be hanging about in these things. People are suffering now. And to have announced as Rishi Sunak did meaningless stuff and then say it's delayed for a couple of years, I mean, awful.
Now, Sunak has himself, Chancellor Sunak has apparently had a bit of a tough time from the press. Now, we'll leave aside his Russian investments for a minute, but the total lack and the total indifference to the poverty, which is getting worse, has really been, a lot of people have been on all sides of the spectrum have been criticising him for that. Did he think, has he made a huge miscalculation here? Did he think, oh, I can get away with it because everybody loves Dishy Rishi, but when people have looked at what he's doing to help, and it's nothing.
I think he's playing to his own, you know. He must have an eye to, I mean, Boris Johnson looks like Partygate apparently doesn't matter anymore, and Boris Johnson can sit and giggle and play silly Westminster games while Rishi Sunak, in fact, was talking about people dying in Ukraine. So this war, seems to have helped Boris Johnson. But it's not going to last forever, and Rishi Sunak must be still looking at the top job as it's seen. So he's playing to his own. He's playing to his own supporters within the Tory party, because that's who he will perceive as being able to make him Prime Minister. So it's my opinion that to him nobody else matters at the moment.
Well, I suppose if you're in Rishi Sunak's position, he's incredibly wealthy. I
Absolutely.
suppose the first thing
He
he thinks
doesn't
about
need
in the
his job,
morning
you know,
isn't how am I going to pay the electricity
No,
bill
what
this
he's
week.
looking for is prestige, importance, I would think, because, as you say, he doesn't need his wages every month, does he?
But I wonder, though, if he's made a huge miscalculation this week, if the wheels have come off the Rishi Sunak bandwagon to be Johnson's replacement. Because the other issue that he's been having a hard time in is the question of his wife's involvement. His wife runs a company which has substantial involvement with Russia. So does that mean, he's been asked several times, does that mean your wife should be on the sanctions list? Should you be in the sanctions list? Now, he's not been comfortable dealing with these questions, obviously. It's not, yes, she should, of course, be withdrawing any involvement from Russia right now. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, one would think so. I wouldn't like to be sitting at their dinner table when they're fighting this one out. Hugh.
Oh, well, so maybe Sunak is not actually going to be the Prime Minister in charge when Scotland holds its independence referendum.
So who's it going to be? Michael Gove is playing a quiet game.
So I wonder who you want. Incidentally, Joe Biden today was asked, what do you think about the prospect that Donald Trump might want to stand against you again? And he said that's fine by him.
Oh, right, I missed that.
Didn't mention him by name, but said if that man wants to stand again, he said something along the lines of, yeah, I wouldn't mind beating that man again. So maybe it's a question of who do we want to beat next time? Who's your favourite loser from the Conservative Party? Anyway, let's move on. So we're going to look at the... one thing Rishi Sunak did, let's give him his due. Rishi Sunak did bring a £5 off a litre of petrol and diesel, right? So 5p, isn't it? 5 pence. Did I say a fiver? 5p.
You did, if only, eh?
Now,
They'd be paying us at the pubs.
There's been complaints, as you often get this kind of situation, don't you, Linda? When prices are going up, the shops, the supermarkets put them up straight away. And when prices are falling, they're a bit slow to pass on the decrease, aren't they?
Well, I haven't been able to work out yet, and I can't find a definitive answer to this. You're an economist, you know about these things, but I know people were saying we haven't had that taken off at the pumps. Is it the fact that the fuel cost is still rising, so without that decrease in duty, would it be even dearer than it is? I don't know yet. And is it true that it's reaching peak and is likely to come down again?
Well,
so how will we ever know where this 5p is making a difference?
Well, first of all, the facts are, as usual with budgets, when these duty changes are announced, they usually come in straight away that night. However, you could argue, of course, that if a filling station has 10,000 litres in the tank underground, well, they've already paid the previous rate. So it's fair to wait until that stuff's been used up and they get a new delivery. So I suppose 2 or 3 days. But then once that happens, the full 5p cut should come in. And I forget exactly which way around it goes, but at the moment I think prices have peaked, but there's a different price wholesale between petrol and diesel. I forget which one is.
Oh,
One's come down and the other one hasn't come down by so much. So
Right.
I forget which way around it is. But there certainly is grounds for passing on a cut at the moment, but who knows with the...
But, you know, that's not helping people with household bills. You know, the stories I'm hearing about folks' direct debits and the level of increase that are being imposed in the direct debits for gas and electricity, horrendous stories. And for folk that are already living on tight budgets, my goodness, the stress must be enormous.
Yes, again, it's... I was almost speechless the other day when we look at the enormity of the crisis facing British people. And we've already said that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation thinks tens of thousands of more people will go into poverty this year, and the UK government just doesn't seem to think that matters. But the fuel bills are going to be astonishing. They will have increased by about a factor of 3. And again, there's no recognition that that's an issue. Again, I did say this the other day, but in the official statement accompanying Sunak's mini budget, the government does say, UK government does say, that's a matter we've already dealt with. The £200, that was announced a few weeks ago, and therefore we have nothing else to announce on it. So when you look at the Chancellor in charge of the economy, one of the huge problems facing the economy is this massive increase in poverty. That's his job to deal with it.
He's just ignored it.
Just do your job, Chancellor Sunak. So we're going to move on to another story. Now, this came up actually in Glasgow today. We will be showing later on some footage from the strike, the student strike later on. But one of the speakers at that from the union, the GMB union, raised the question of a P&O strike.
Right.
And there was widespread support in the audience
yeah.
when he said that we should, we'll not be using any P&O ferries. By the way, if you're going to Stranraer, or rather Cairnrand to line, I think you can get an Stena ferry instead. Other ferries are available. So we've just been having a look at the background to this. Now, we're referring to, as you probably know, to a company that was set up in 1822 by Brodie McGee Wilcox and Arthur Anderson. They set up a shipping company which got the contract to deliver the mail around Spain and Portugal, so they called it, eventually it became known as the Peninsula and Oriental Steam Company. Now, the inheritance of Mr. Wilcox and Mr. Anderson are Dubai ports, and the company is now run by the Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem. Now, Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, we gathered, did actually have a discussion over a year ago with Sultan Ahmed, and the Sultan pointed out to Grant Shapps, and this is on record, that he was having difficulties managing P&O because so he would have to do cost cutting because he was facing competition from Ireland. He couldn't face competition from ferries from Ireland. So he said to Grant Shapps a year ago, watch this space, I'm going to have to do something. So apparently Shapps said, well, let me know before you do. So that was it. So I'm mystified that if it's impossible to run P&O without sacking your workers and bringing on people up below minimum wage, how on earth do the Irish manage to run ferries?
Well, that small independent nation just off the coast of Scotland seems to manage an awful lot rather well. And I would like Scotland to be more along that line. Now, I'm a bit lost in all of this, you know, this stuff about competition from Ireland, I'm not understanding. But, you know, looking at the whole thing, it's just appalling for these folk that have been laid off. And it's appalling for these folk that are taken on in ridiculous wages, you know. But there's two big issues here. One is the maritime rules that allow registration of boats and crews in different places. Now, I would like to think that even though we're not in it anymore, the EU should be looking at some of this stuff very, very closely and, you know, reaching agreements with partners about the decent treatment of seafarers. But there's another issue. You know, the UK governments that are holding their hands up and say, oh, it's nothing to do with us. Well, sovereign nations are able to look at employment law and practice and make rules. So this could be dealt with and could have been dealt with over long, long periods of UK government control when it comes to employment laws and rights for people who are working on contracts given by the government. And they have chosen not to over these years. And to suddenly hold up their hands in horror and say, oh, this is terrible, it's appalling, we didn't know this could happen. Aye, you did. Folk have been getting exploited for a long time by these loopholes. This is a biggie. And that's why it has drawn the attention of absolutely everyone. But they'll get away with it because the maritime rules that govern such things and UK employment law will allow them to get away with it.
Well, the interesting thing about an international trade, like the maritime trade, is to ask, as you say, right, which law are we talking about? Is it the law of UK or the law of Cyprus? I think the ships were registered in Cyprus.
And the workers in Jersey.
But
Is that it? Yeah.
But so the issue is, well, first of all, when it is about employment law, so I'm just wondering whose employment law.
Yeah.
But what it says in British employment law, well, first of all, a contract is a contract. That's what's supposed to be the basis of it, right? If I sign and say I'm going to deliver this amount of work, and you say you're going to deliver this amount of wages. Now, the law does say that companies can renegotiate a contract if their commercial conditions are adverse. They can say to the workers, it's not working, we're going to have to renegotiate. And the law says, yes, you can do that. But then it says there now is a code of practice. You give plenty of notice. You speak to the representatives if there is a trade union. You hammer out an agreement and explain to everybody what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So all of that procedure has been completely ignored. So that's UK employment law. It says a contract is a contract, but if one party has to change it, okay, maybe you can do that, but only if you follow these guidelines. They did none of that. I don't think, I haven't looked at this actually, it doesn't say anywhere you go on Zoom and tell everyone they've been sacked.
But these guys know what they're doing. They'll have lawyers coming out their ears, the chaps that are running the ferries. They have made a calculated decision. I mean, I see the guys saying, yeah, we're aware we broke the law, right? I'm not totally au fait with what laws they have actually broken, but I suspect that they have looked at this and said, right, we'll just go for it because actually it'll be worth it.
Yeah, I have a feeling
They'll take the hit and move on.
Because the other element in it, of course, is that the company has offered a payoff to the workers, and I think the idea is take the money within a certain period of time and don't say anything.
They'll reckon they can ride the storm, and that people will then forget and start using them again. And Hugh, I noticed today, should we point out, I noticed today in a lot of the newspapers, P&O Cruises were taking out big page adverts to say, just so as everybody's aware, we're nothing to do with P&O ferries. We're not owned by the same company, and please
separate,
don't hammer us.
Yes,
yeah.
I didn't look at the company history, but I think when P&O, the old Peninsular and Oriental, I think it was sold in 2008 or something, so presumably at that time they were separate companies.
Yeah.
So share the same name, maybe the same history, but they are actually different entities. Now we're going to move on to, maybe this is a related topic, because we've had a report today about green free ports. Now just to go up to date with the news. First of all, the free port is a proposal from the UK government, as you know, to establish, I can't remember how many it is, about a dozen free ports around the UK. There were a certain number to be located in England, and Scotland was to be dealt with separately. So first of all, what the Scottish government has agreed to today is that there will be 2 Scottish free ports, but these will be different to what's been proposed in England. So first of all, with the agreement on both parties in the Scottish government, they're called green free ports. So we'll look at what that means exactly. But secondly, they have to include guarantees for a legal minimum wage and for various other protections, including a commitment to move towards net zero. So what's happening today, just to update it, is that bidders can put in to be a free port, and they have to submit their proposals, but the Scottish Government has to agree whether they meet those guidelines.
Yeah. I mean, I would say good on the Scottish Government, good on Kate Forbes for negotiating this, because I understand that it's not going to be the same in south of the border, and that our government here in Scotland has insisted on these principles, and they're really, really important. I mean, it's not just the minimum wage, it's the real living wage, really important. So it's about fair work practice. It's about net zero ambitions. So it's two-pronged. And, you know, it's back to what we talked about in the last wee article about P&O. It's back to procurement. If you are procuring work, services, and taking bids for things, you can put certain conditions that have to be met by any bidders, or their bids will be just discounted. And that's what Kate Forbes and Ivan McKee on behalf of the Scottish Government have pushed for. I see Michael Gove has agreed it. I'm quite interested to see whether the unions down in England will start pushing for the same stuff for the English bids as well. I don't know, is there a Welsh one? Is there?
I can't remember what the
I
locations
can't remember,
are.
but
There
I would
probably is one.
imagine that Wales will follow the same way as Scotland and take their lead
I'm
from their
not up to
government.
date on that, I must admit. I
Yeah.
didn't look at that one. But I did look at the general idea of free ports. Now, I just before we move on, I should remind everyone that this is supposed to be a Brexit benefit. But that's unlikely
No.
because, first of all, Britain did actually have free ports in the 1980s. The Thatcher government brought them in, 6 of them, including Prestwick, but they were done away with because they weren't really doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. They don't really make anything new. They just change the
Well,
rules
that's
in one
right.
area and maybe moved trade into that
Well,
area.
it was the same, Hugh, if you remember, the big thing that I think it was Margaret Thatcher that set them up, enterprise zones. On land, away from the ports. And you had these big enterprise parks that had certain tax and rent and rates benefits. And yeah, that was the charge levelled against them, was that all it did was make existing companies move in and create wastelands elsewhere. It didn't necessarily bring in new business. So I'm really impressed by Kate Forbes and her team. So I hope very much that the two in Scotland, wherever they may be, all the mistakes of the past will be learned. And that not only the procurement process, but the ongoing practice will be looking at new businesses. And Scotland's got a good record for attracting new business. So I think Kate and her team are on top of things, and that they'll be looking at it very, very closely and saying, this has to bring benefit, not just move things from elsewhere. So watching brief, I think, on that one.
Yes, so we'll see what the assessment is once they actually start. So there'll be 2 green free ports for Scotland, but the Scottish Government has to make sure that the rules are being followed for anyone who wants to bid for them. So I'm going to link that to our next story, Linda, because of course the green idea is that there has to be a commitment to move towards net zero. And our next story is on the schools' strike for climate. This is of course the student movement that was begun by Greta Thunberg originally, I think about 3 years ago. In Scotland, nothing much has happened during the COVID period, but today it's back. The schools' strike for climate is back. So first of all, I'm going to go straight to some footage of that, which I recorded earlier on today. I'm going to interview, what's your name please?
C. O'Connor.
And what are you here for? What's your capacity here today, C?
I'm here as an activist, as an organiser, and as a person who's concerned about climate justice.
Okay, do you think at the moment that climate has dropped off the agenda because of other issues, obviously, including the Ukraine situation?
I don't think climate was ever meaningfully on the agenda, so I don't think it can be dropped off.
In that case, I guess you're probably not going to support the Conservative government's idea. And Conservatives in other countries have said that the crisis means we need new nuclear. Now, what do you say to that?
Currently, I don't support any government's agenda on climate. I don't think any country or any government is doing enough. But that being said, screw the Conservatives.
Yeah, but on the same point, of course, they're also saying, and in America, they're also saying, well, what we need to do is to get off dependency on Putin and start using more of our oil and gas. What's your reaction to that idea?
Drilling more oil and gas domestically isn't going to realistically solve the problem with relying on Russian fuels. That timeline doesn't work in terms of it'll take a couple of years to get new oil fields online. We can't refine, as far as I know, fossil fuels here in the UK, so they have to be exported most of the time anyway. So the idea of domestic energy security in that way is really kind of a myth. So drilling more oil here in the UK is just going to accelerate the climate crisis. It is not going to stop Russia.
It's Hugh Stewart here. I'm in George Square, Glasgow, and this is the return of a climate strike by students, Fridays for Climate. Now, I'm here with a group of students who've come over from, excuse me, could you give me your name and tell me where you've come from today?
My name's Megan and I've came from the Isle of Arran.
And you've came over from Arran. Was that a number of you, not just yourself?
Yeah, there's 8 of us, 9 of us.
Okay, Megan, so tell me what led you all to come here today? What's behind your thinking?
Well, there's an eco club at Arran Youth Foundations, and it's a really busy club, and it's really great. We all feel very strongly about our future, and we know that climate change is an important part of our future, so we're here to fight for it.
Are you concerned at all that climate has dropped off the agenda with other things happening, particularly the war in Ukraine? Do you think that people have stopped talking about the climate emergency?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of put to rest because not many young people actually know that it's a problem and that it could affect them quite big in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Megan.
I'm Molly.
Right, Molly, and you've also come over from Arden to Glasgow. Mal, why are you here today?
To say to people that stop littering and use more renewable energy to save our planet.
Yep. Do you think Scotland's in a good position to use renewable energy, or do you think we have to depend on gas and oil?
A bit of both. It's definitely getting better, but we still need to cut down on oil and fossil fuels.
Okay, so you think strongly enough about it to take the day off school and come over to Glasgow today, right? Tell me, how does the school feel about it? I take it you are here with a teacher, so obviously they must be backing you, is that right?
I think it's really good that we're coming here and to protest for climate change.
Well, thank you for speaking to Broadcasting Scotland. What's your name, please?
My name's Molly. I'm another Molly. So I've came over from Arran. I go to Arran High School, and I'm here today because I think it's really important to make everyone aware of what's going on. And I think that if we can do anything to try and spread the message, it's worth a shot.
Now, the Tory government has said that these days we have an energy crisis, and of course the situation in Ukraine makes it worse. What do you say to people who argue we need to pump more oil to keep people's houses warm?
Well, it's just, I think the thing is though, I think war is a really big issue right now, and I think the fact that there's so much oil issues, I think it's also great that we have renewable energy, and I think that should also be brought into it and be used a lot more. And I know that it's quite an issue to get a lot of it, but there's a lot produced by water, and there's 99% chance that it could become popular in the future if this works.
Yep. Of course, in the Firth of Clyde you can look across to the Hunterston nuclear power stations. Is that the way forward, do you think? It doesn't produce any carbon?
I don't think nuclear is the way forward either. I think hydroelectric power is produced by water mainly, so I think that's the way forward.
And I'm going to talk to Alyssa, who's also come over from Arden. Is that right, Alyssa? You've
Yes.
joined us from... Yeah. And what are your particular concerns for being in this day of action today?
More so pollution of the seas, because it's getting really worrying from how much plastic is in the ocean, and I'm just scared because what if one day we just wake up and there's no fish, nothing, and it's just a blank sea.
So you're saying, although the big focus recently has been on energy, of course, and heating bills, but you're saying that's just one of the climate of the environmental challenges that we have to tackle now?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what about the other issues that people are talking about these days? Do you think we should be looking for more renewables, or would it be better to start using more new nuclear? What's your view on that?
Renewable energy, like hydroelectric energy, because I think that's the way to go.
Okay, listen, thank you for talking to Broadcasting Scotland. I'm now going to talk to Neve, who's holding a... Let's hold that banner up now. Where did that come from?
I made it myself.
Excellent. So you're Neve, and you've also joined us from Arden. Right, so Neve, let's have a look at what you've said here. You're covering a lot of topics. You should recycle and keep animals alive, don't use fossil fuels, and litter. Now, one of your colleagues also mentioned litter. Is that because you come from the wonderful island of Arden? Are you particularly concerned about looking after nature?
Yes, I am. I've seen quite a lot of litter on the side of the roads and through paths and everything. It's quite concerning.
Yeah, I see. So you've come over here and you've taken the day off to make a big trip. On the climate issue, do you think that's an important issue that people have stopped talking about recently?
Yes, I think it is. With everything going on between Ukraine and Russia, I think it has been quieted down.
Yep, so, well, thank you for taking the trouble to talk to Broadcasting Scotland today, Neve. Okay, so as you can see, there was a theme there that it is time that the climate emergency was back on the agenda, and yeah, I think everyone there agreed with that general point. So as you can see, I was raising questions about the alternative because that, of course, is
Aye.
the Conservative view in Britain and in America, is that we should start pumping more oil and get new nuclear out. So
Yeah, and the other thing I've heard about is another move to be reintroducing the whole shale gas argument as well. Tell you what really struck me there, Hugh, was that was all young women you spoke to.
it was, yes, yes.
Yeah, it
There
was
were a couple of
interesting.
lads in that group from Arran, but for one reason or another, those were the clips we used. There was a young
And,
gentleman. I'm afraid I screwed up the sound, so I'm sorry. That's why that one wasn't there.
But they were, do you know, it was good to listen to them, wasn't it? It was, and you know that they're holding on to their belief, even though, you know, as you said, it seems to have certainly fallen off the agenda in terms of reporting, and things, that they're holding on to their beliefs and fighting for it. It's good.
Now, there was one point I should have brought up at the time. The first speaker, I think, said about the idea of opening up the Cambo field. That's back on again, as well as fracking and shale. Yeah, Cambo is now back on the agenda. But the first person I interviewed, that was Si O'Connor, did say, well, it's not an immediate solution. It'll be 2 or 3 years down the line. I think there is actually refining capacity here anyway in various refineries, Scotland and Wales and in Lincolnshire. But there's also this time lag, of course. So if you're going to try and make it for this winter, that's not going to happen. The original timetable for Campbell, which was cancelled in 2019 or so, would have had it coming on stream by 2024. So that's what I looked at earlier on today.
5 years.
So obviously that's not going to be an immediate solution anyway. So I suppose the argument is how many more hydro systems, as the guilds were arguing, or how many more wind farms or storage facilities could be constructed in that time for less money.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been trying to follow the debate because, of course, the Green Party are being very active in this debate now. Well, they always were. That sounded strange. But, you know, the UK government is now saying we should be looking at shale oil, we should be looking at more oil fields, and the Greens are being very active in coming out against proposals. So I've been reading quite a lot into it. There's a lot there. I mean, we shouldn't forget that we started talking about the just transition away from oil and fossil fuels and stuff. It was never deemed to be an absolutely immediate thing. So I think the argument has become very marginalised on either side, and there's a lot of discussion has to go on, and maybe some compromise is needed all round.
Yeah, so that was the school's climate strike meeting with a small demonstration in Glasgow. It was actually quite big. I didn't really show very many pictures there of the other people who were milling around. There were a few hundred there.
Who was the guy in the red coat?
And I didn't speak to him. He was interviewing people. He had his own camera and he was taking interviews.
Oh,
So
right.
that I should have asked who he was. I just rushed straight back up here to edit the video. So I didn't get around to ask everybody. Yeah, it must have been warm and that.
Yeah.
So they're back to the student climate strike because that climate crisis is not going to go away. By the way, one of our platform speakers, just as I was leaving, was pointing out that if the oceans continue to rise by the end of the century, well, where I was standing in Glasgow, that will be underwater. So it's an emergency, but it's one of these slow-running emergencies that we don't seem to do anything about until it's too late. Now, we've just got 2 more stories tonight. So, first of all, news from the Scottish Government about investing in the food and drinks sector. We just heard today that companies in that sector can apply for grants. Now, this is what it's for. Food and drink businesses can benefit from a share of more than £7.3 million aimed at increasing production, expanding storage facilities, or purchasing new equipment. A total of 29 businesses, large and small, are going to receive grants ranging from £1,000 up to £1.4 million for food. This is from a grant scheme called the Food Processing, Marketing and Cooperation Scheme. And that's the first time I've heard of that one. So the aim is to increase production of healthier, low-calorie dairy products, upgraded vegetable processing facilities, and expanded storage. So Rural Affairs Secretary Mary Gudgeon says this funding will play an important role in helping producers continue to deliver high-quality, innovative and nutritious products that can be enjoyed both at home and abroad, securing and creating jobs in our rural communities and boosting the economy. She went on to say, I look forward to seeing how these grants will help businesses to move into emerging markets and to ensure the long-term viability of our primary producers. Okay, so that's all about improving the efficiency and ability of the food sector to supply. Okay, so of course we are an exporter. Scotland is an exporter of high quality produce. So obviously markets are difficult because of Brexit. So does this mean maybe trying to manage that?
I would say so. I mean, the food and drink industry in Scotland has been a success story. You know, over the last few years, consistent rises in exporting and indeed in quality in a lot of cases. So, yeah, Brexit's a real blow for food and drink for Scotland. So measures have to be taken. And it would seem to me that this has been worked on very, very carefully and looking at the best solutions to try and keep that success story running. So, yeah, it's a good news story.
Yep, so that's grants to improve the efficiency of storage and the quality of food, particularly aiming at export markets. Now, our final story tonight is about broadcasting. Now, UK-wide, Ofcom is, of course, the organisation, the Quango, or the non-governmental departments, which looks over various aspects of broadcasting. So, well, first of all, the story is today that the government has picked a leader for Ofcom. The chair is going to be Michael Grade. Now, that's a very well-known name. Michael Grade has been in television just about his entire life because his father was also a major figure in television. Lou Grade, wasn't it? Was he in the Lords? Anyway, Michael Grade is in the House of Lords. He's a Tory peer. So, on the one hand, having a Tory government selecting a Tory peer is not surprising. But on the other hand, you really can't get a better CV in television than Michael Grade. And also, maybe if you look back to this story, because it's been running for a couple of years, originally Prime Minister Johnson headhunted the man for the job. It was Lord Dacre of, or is he a Lord? Sorry, Dacre of, I forget the chap's first name, sorry, who was the editor of the Daily Mail, the ultra-Tory Daily Mail. So he didn't get the job. I don't know if you remember the story, but when he was first of all picked, there was a huge outcry. He went to a Parliament committee because the appointee has to be vetted. In fact, Michael Grade will speak to MPs before he gets confirmed. And Lord Dacre did not get past that first stage. And so the Tory government redrew the rules and told Dacre to have a go at it again.
Was that right?
Sometime during the second process, Dacre withdrew from it anyway. So,
do you know, they're shameless. They really are shameless. I mean, Paul Dacre was just such a partisan person to be putting up for any kind of public job like that. Completely partisan. And I can understand why folk were up in arms about it. I think Michael Grade, I don't know. Actually, I don't really know Michael Grade's politics. I think he's respected, generally respected across the board. So a very different character than Paul Dacre. But, you know, the fact that the Lords just makes me switch off straight away. You know, jobs for the boys stuff, I hate it.
It's a weird thing about Britain, isn't it, that we have this spare organisation that you can appoint people to if you want to help your friends. But the other issue about Ofcom, though, is about the role of the job. Because at the moment, Ofcom is in charge, I think, of just television and radio, but it doesn't have anything to do with social media. Now, of course, news, true and false, spreads rapidly through social media nowadays. So maybe the issue we have to discuss is, should the Ofcom widen out its remit to start looking at the other media?
Well, this has been an ongoing discussion, hasn't it? I mean, I think we're all behind times in terms of dealing with social media and all its forums. I mean, I certainly found that through my own experience in the Scottish Parliament. You know, you can have rules and guidelines and everything else about, for example, members of Parliament talking to the media, giving interviews to newspapers, leaking information. But there was actually nothing in place to sanction the use of social media, which can be very, very damaging. Although we should never forget, it's a small political group that use social media. I think it's less than 20% of people use Twitter, which is the most vicious of all social media that I can see. So yeah, but we've all been a bit behind the plate on this one.
But I think it is going to be included in new legislation in the House of Commons.
Yes,
is going to discuss So it looks like Michael Grade taking over of the Ofcom, assuming the MPs committee agrees to ratify his new job. So it will be widened out to have some overview of social media as well, and I suppose that'll be about cutting out misinformation, particularly if that leads to any dangerous outcomes.
Yeah.
I know the media world is certainly much more complicated than it used to be. So I'm told they were debating in Westminster the idea that social media needs to be regulated. Up to now, really. Well, social media basically it's run by 2 or 3 very large companies, and they regulate themselves.
Yes.
So in Britain, anyway, at least Michael Grade will be in charge of that regulation. But how to do it, how to balance free speech with the public interest. Are you actually talking sense, or have you just made this rubbish up? So, Linda, we do our best to talk sense on Broadcasting Scotland. We do our best to report what we know is happening here and to try and put it into context which suits Scotland. We don't think that Scotland has media, really. There are organisations which have Scotland in their name, but they're not really Scottish. They're UK-wide. And that's really why Linda and I and the other members of the team are here. We think Scotland needs a Scottish media, and that means one that's created, curated, managed, edited in Scotland. It doesn't mean that it's only going to talk about Scotland, but as we've done today, it's going to talk about worldwide issues also. But it has to be here because there isn't really a Scottish media. There isn't really a Scottish TV station. So we want to be that station. We have the equipment and the facilities, and we're ready to expand. And the more money we get in, the quicker we will expand, and the quicker we'll increase the range of programmes. So if you look online, please, I know a lot of you are doing this already, so thank you. But if you would like to contribute and become one of our supporters, please look at broadcastingscotland.scot and you'll find the donate button. All the other stuff we put out is on the website as well. So that's it from me and from Linda Fabiani tonight. So we'll be back with the full Scottish Sunday lunchtime. And so from me, Hugh Stewart, and from Linda, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.